really think that I'm not here to hear our anecdotes and stuff. So real quick, while we're setting up our jazz too, I do want to thank again Mr. Harf for playing bass, Ms. Dalton for working with the 8th graders, all of our bands really. And I'd like to thank Ethan Charles for sitting in and playing guitar tonight. Real quick, I would like to, before I forget, I would like to thank our premier sponsors for sponsoring the band. We had a lot of support this year, and you can see those sponsors in our program. Cape Radiology Group, Shibblebines Music, Media Leaf LLC, Montgomery Bank, SEMO Box Company, First State Community Bank, Cape Girardeau County Abstract and Company, Incorporated, Burger King Cape Girardeau, and Kids Convenience Stores. So thank you. If you are part of any of them, thank you for supporting the band. We appreciate you. All right, so this is at the high school. We have 2 jazz bands. This is our Jazz 2, and Miss Dalton has been working with them a lot also, and we got a lot of saxophones, don't we? So that's probably a good thing for jazz band. All right, so we're gonna just do a real quick warm up, and then we're gonna get started, okay? Hey, so we have another guest musician tonight. Our bass player is sick, so Davis Mills is practically sight reading this concert too. So help me thank Davis Mills. think a couple parents recently bought drum sets for the kids to practice at home, and some have been practicing. So, isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? More with Jazz 2. Miss Dalton's going to come up so I can sit in with the trumpet section. So about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, usually when a trumpet player gets their braces on, it's a real challenge. I remember in 8th grade, I got my braces on. It's like everything changed because you got all this metal in your mouth. Well, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we have 2 trumpets. So 50% of the trumpet section got their braces on. And then in that exact same week, the other 50% got their braces off. So we've kind of been transitioning back to normalcy and getting used to braces. So they've done a fantastic job. So hey, let's thank the trumpet section. Give them a hand. Okay, so this is our last one. We're going to feature Connor Glick on guitar. This is a real fun chart. We hope you enjoy 6-string shuffle.
Lots of solos. Okay.
All right, nice job. Hey, real quick, I want to thank Mr. Bellinger, who's in the audience. Mr. Bellinger has a fine guitar studio, so we've got lots of good, great guitarists because of him. So wave to him, Mr. Bellinger. He's right here. His guitar studio at the high school, he's got 2 classes now, and they're kind of busting at the seams. Almost with so many students that he doesn't have enough rooms or instruments for. So he's doing a great job with that. Give us a second just to transition Jazz 1, and then we'll be done with our concert tonight. Jazz 1, come up. Jazz 2, transition. Hey, so this is our Jazz 1, and we're going to play for you. I do want to thank Miss Staple, who's our administrator that's here tonight. So thank you, Miss Staple. We have yes, give her a hand. We have very supportive administration. We're very grateful for our administration. I want to talk real quick about one thing. In the late 1960s and I think most of the 70s, we had a fine band director here named Bill Ewing, and he kind of really infused and brought our jazz program to Cape Central and put a lot of effort into it, made it really great. He even took their jazz band to Europe for almost an entire month. They traveled in Europe and they did a record. You probably see them around from time to time. It says Europe's 71, I believe is what it says. Some of you have several copies at home, maybe too. Anyway, he was a fine jazz educator, and we give a jazz award every year to one of our students. And this year's recipient, if he would stand up and let me recognize him, this year's recipient is Mr. Austin Bellinger. Austin, when he started playing in our jazz band, he actually played in the 8th grade jazz band in 7th grade. So he did 2 years in a row playing piano, and he's played piano in high school, and he's been in the all-district jazz band a couple times, and he's just a fine musician. And I think you're going to hear him play a solo on this first tune.
About one more round of applause for Austin. Hi, I'm Michael Haar, and I get the privilege of standing in front of this group every day this second semester. This is our Jazz 1 group, and I'm going to get out of the way and quit talking. This is a shuffle for you called The Groove Broker. And it's going to feature Ethan Adams on guitar, Jacob Beasley, tenor saxophone, Brevin Coleman, trumpet, and then Austin Bellinger on piano. Here's The Groove Broker. I'm gonna steal this microphone before Jacob steals it back from me. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment and just say that we don't take for granted the fact that we get to perform in this beautiful facility, Kinder Performance Hall. We also have fantastic administration. We've got Miss Danielle Staple here supporting us tonight. We cannot do what we do without amazing administrators, without amazing staff, and support from the entire building. So could you give all of our administrators and staff just a round of applause? This one's a tenor saxophone feature. It will feature our very own Jacob Easley. This is If I Could Fly. We are blessed with two awesome bass players. Both of them are wonderful in what they do. It's just kind of an added bonus when we get a bass player that also plays upright bass. We're used to electric bass being kind of the main instrument for our bass players, but yeah, we've got two awesome bass players. We're going to feature one of them on this song. It's not very often that I kind of call out what I think is kind of an obscure jazz piece. It's pretty famous, but a lot of times, you know, we do our best to educate our students on famous jazz tunes. But when I said Haitian fight song, I was not really expecting much of a reaction, but Davis Mills' eyes lit up. And this is a Charles Mingus piece, maybe one of his most famous songs, and yeah, we're going to feature him this time on upright bass, on acoustic bass. This is the Charles Mingus tune arranged by Andrew Hamzy, and this is Haitian Fight Song, and we're going to hear not only Davis at the beginning. Oh man, I need my cheat sheet. Thank goodness for Mr. Lamar. He makes these cheat sheets for us. We've got Xander Kane on trombone, we have Mabry Shaver on trumpet, and then we're going to hear Davis at the very end. We'll close it out. This is Haitian Fight Song.
Make sure he's not playing in front of his amp. That pickup is feedback. He needs to move over a lot.
to say thank you for being here. Maybe not as big of a deal with this concert with a few less students than, say, our concert band and wind symphony concerts, but a lot of times it's easier if instead of congregating out in the lobby, if you just kind of wait in here and let the students come to you. That way it's a little bit less congested out there. But I want to say thank you for being here. This is their, we had a couple jazz festivals canceled. This is their one and only really performance for the public. So thank you for being here. We hope you've enjoyed it. A little bit earlier, the Jazz 2, you heard them play The Chicken, which is a fun little funky jazz tune. This is kind of the homage to that, sequel, whatever you want to call it. This is a little play on the words, Unleash the Kraken. This is Unleash the Chicken.